Welcome to Amp Life, the #1 podcast for amputees, hosted by an amputee, and brought to you by Delatour Orthotics and Prosthetics, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm the Brian Moe, the social media advisor for Delatour, and I also happen to be a below-knee amputee. Let's get into today's episode. How's it going, everyone? My guest today is the president, CEO, and founder of HuMoTech, Josh Caputo. Josh, welcome to Amp Life.
Hey, Brian. Thanks a lot for having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely. First, let me start today by saying congratulations to you and happy second birthday to HuMoTech. I don't want to give too much away early on here, but for the benefit of those listening who are not familiar with HuMoTech, briefly describe what the company does.
We build laboratory-based robotic prosthetics and exoskeletons.
Take me back a little. Did you always want to pursue robotics after you graduated from Mount Lebanon?
Honestly, after high school, I was pretty confused about what I wanted to do next. I think deep down in my gut, I had a passion for engineering, but at the time, it felt like I was taking a leap of faith going into engineering. So from an early age, I always had a fascination with machines, cars, and space shuttles. I was always building Lego sets and playing MechWarrior. I had a childlike curiosity for robotics, but didn't really know what it meant to be an engineer. So I signed up at Carnegie Mellon, and I thought, I'll get a dual degree in mechanical engineering and electrical and computer engineering, and then I'll go on to build awesome robots.
Now, I had read that originally you weren't real interested in sticking around Pittsburgh after graduation. You thought maybe you'd go somewhere else, and you go to CMU and you get to see these robots in person.
That's funny. I don't know where you read that, but that's true. Ever since we moved to Pittsburgh, I have been thinking about, what's next. But Pittsburgh has kept me here for quite some time. I think originally Carnegie Mellon attracted me because of the amazing robotics projects they were undertaking. At the time, it was the autonomous Humvees driving through the desert that really caught my attention. The reality is that once I went on to study at Carnegie Mellon, I didn't work on any of those projects, but they did really inspire me. After finishing my undergrad studies and working at a few different companies during the summers, I was convinced that I wanted to get a PhD and take things to the next step. But honestly, I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. So I just, got on Google and was searching different graduate research programs, trying to find robotics programs that caught my interest, and fell upon the work of Dr. Steve Collins, who was starting up a new lab at Carnegie Mellon. And all of a sudden, I saw this opportunity to combine my passion for robotics with a problem that I saw as very, it was very close to my heart because I saw what, the patients who need to use these devices were going through. And I wanted to put my engineering skills to work, making life better for this patient population.
Like a lot of kids that grew up in the 70s and the early 80s, I'd look through the Sears or Montgomery Ward. I don't know if they had Montgomery Ward. I grew up in Fayette County, so we had Montgomery Ward in Morgantown. But I'd look through these catalogs at Christmas time, and one of the things that I would see would be robots. Different, some would be small, some would be bigger. And I would always tell my mom that I wanted a robot for Christmas. I never got a robot for Christmas, but I always wanted one because I thought they had these trays, and I thought that would be so cool to be like, hey, robot, go get me a soda or give me a snack or something. And, I was like 5, so what did I really know about robots? But when I mention robots to people today, I did this recently. Number one reaction is Rosie from the Jetsons. first thing that, in my age group. If my father-in-law, probably not. A little bit younger, Terminator or some other cyborg. Now, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, nobody actually has a housekeeper that's a robot. And despite numerous claims to be back, we haven't seen the Terminator since 2015. Where does perception meet reality with robots? How are you seeing robots influence and impact our society?
Boy, this is a big question. I think one thing that people forget is that we, as a culture, have been fascinated with robots for a long, long time. There was an explosion of interest, in the 50s. That was, it was ages ago. So to some extent, I think robots have always been the next big thing.
Right.
And not to belittle the amazing progress that we've made, but I think we all need to be patient. But of course, robotics has made a huge impact on our society, particularly in the manufacturing space, where most of us in our day-to-day, we don't see those robots, but they're behind the scenes, making all of our industries operate more efficiently. Coming back to the world of prosthetics and exoskeletons, there's like in other industries, a lot of excitement about robotics, and I think we're just in the early stages. As as a patient, there's robotics technology out there, but it's not particularly accessible.
Right.
And that has to do with a variety of factors, I think. If we just talk about prosthetic feet, it still seems like the simpler devices. Let's see. What do I want to say? And this is one of the hard things, because you don't want to bash the companies that make these cool robots.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that these robotic devices are dramatically more expensive than conventional devices. And we're in a world where, someone's got to pay for these devices, and whoever that is wants to see evidence that they're going to provide the patient with a benefit.
Absolutely.
And if it's going to cost 100 times more, there better be a mountain of evidence.
Right.
And, that's not the case with a lot of new, exciting, emerging technology. It's kind of unavoidable. You develop this new technology, you get people excited about it, but to build up the mountain of evidence takes time.
Absolutely. And
millions of dollars in clinical studies and, years of patients using these devices out in the world. So I see the field as, in a bit of a catch-22 right now.
Right.
There's all this exciting new technology, but there's a real lack of evidence, which impedes technological progress. I strayed a bit from your question.
Oh, no, that's fine. You really hit a lot of great points, because, as a patient, I'm keenly aware of what insurance companies do. Because, I like to swim, okay? I love it. That's an understatement. Anyone who knows me, I love to swim. The company that makes my foot posted a picture of me on social media, and they said natural habitat. It's me in the pool. It's natural habitat. And that's pretty much true. And so I wanted a prosthesis that I could wear in the pool. And I do. This leg, when I go to the Y, shoes off, I get in the water. It's a done deal. And that's what I wanted, because I wanted to feel like I was functioning as someone with two natural legs and not have to, I have this separate swim leg, or I can't use a leg. I didn't want to deal with any of that. And so I did the research, sought out components that were waterproof. And I'm very happy with my leg, and it's not the most expensive leg, but it probably keeps the insurance company happy because of that fact. I did a training not long ago with a company, and they give us their spec sheet with the prices. And it was a foot and ankle combination, $60,000 at the top. And I thought, that's more than my Jeep. That, like, seriously, that's, like double my Jeep, really. And I'm like, that's just, and so I interact a lot with patients, and they say, the insurance company won't give me a prosthesis. Why? And I said, they'll give you a prosthesis. They'll pay for a prosthesis. They're just not going to pay for this advanced, with the componentry and the electronics and the robotics and things. We did a training, and this hand, I get to, like, literally met this hand. There's a picture of me somewhere shaking hands with this prosthesis, this hand, and this thing could grasp me and squeeze my hand, and it was incredible. So I, to what you were saying, there are some deterrents and different factors that prevent people from accessing the top of the line technology that's out there. You mentioned earlier that you saw a problem with patients who need prosthesis, and so you decide to combine what you're doing with prosthetics. Can you give me some specific examples of what you were seeing? Were you seeing people struggling in their day-to-day, or struggling with their gait or walking, or just with being able to do activities that they enjoyed?
So I approached this from pure robotics, mindset. I was trained as an engineer. I sort of grew to appreciate the difficulties that amputees face over time. I mean, I just had this sort of instinctual reaction that, wow, losing one of my limbs would be horrible, but didn't really, have a nuanced understanding of what they were going through. So, my story began as a roboticist, thinking about how do we use robotics to, create a more useful prosthetic limb. And as my research progressed, and as we experienced some of the difficulties that anyone who's trying to build a new limb faces, I began to understand the complexity a bit more. So one of the first things that happened was we got hooked up with Dr. Marianne McNevich, a physiatrist in town, because we were just looking for patients to participate in our studies.
Right.
I initially saw this as just a practical problem. I've got this foot. I need to test it. I need some bodies to test it with.
Right.
But wow, was I in for a surprise. I learned so much from those early interactions. Started talking with patients, starting to get a better understanding what actually matters to them. And I began realizing some of the fundamental problems that are limiting this field. As we progressed through our research, we had some very interesting, surprising results that inspired us to keep going, motivated the use of robotics in prosthetics. But then later on, we started to, the nature of our studies shifted a little bit, and we started to appreciate that the technology that works well for one patient may be the complete wrong thing for another patient. Started to realize that the patient device fit is very nuanced, and it's complicated in ways that we don't quite understand yet. We can't really model them. If you walk through the door, there's no survey or mathematical model that will spit out all the answers for me. As a clinician, I would still need to rely on my intuition, my past experience with other patients who are similar to you. But I think, you can probably speak to this. That's not always enough. Sometimes it's not after years of trial and error that you really figure out the product that works well for you. So we want to accelerate that process. We want to gather evidence early on in the process before prescription. We want to pick the device that is expected to provide you with the most benefit based on data rather than a guess.
Right. I believe that surmises exactly what should happen, because I recently went to my physiatrist. I see Dr. Michael Munin at UPMC, and I said I want my current foot that I have, I won't mention who it's with, but it's a great foot. And I said, I want this foot. It was their newest offering. I had their last offering, and it propelled me to another level than what I could do before I had the foot. And I said, and I was researching this foot, and I said, that's what I need. And I said, because it says it will do this, that's what I need. And he says to me, there's not enough evidence base that this is medically necessary. And I said, and I reminded him, I said, you diagnosed me as having severe osteoarthritis in my hips, did you not? Yes, I did. They advertised that this foot will reduce the shock and absorption to the joints and cause less joint pain. And he said, okay, I can write my notes like that. And so it's that. And so then, the insurance company approved the foot because there was that little bit of evidence suggesting the patient needs this because it will do this for the patient. And a lot of times we're recording in East Liberty for anyone who doesn't know, and that was a fire truck going by. And so that's the benefit of live recording. You never know what you're going to pick up. But so so the insurance company said, yes, we'll give you this foot because you have this other diagnosis too. And I was like, that's awesome. And it's done everything that they said it would. And I told the company, I said, your claims, at least for me, are accurate. You said the foot will, and it absolutely for me. But one of the things you said, though, is that or alluded to, is it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario. The foot that I wear, while there are other patients who wear it, it's not perfect for everyone. It's not ideal for everyone. And I'm keenly aware of that. People say, hey, I want your foot. And I was like, really? Because it may not work for you like it does for me. I wanted a foot, number one, that I could swim with, so it needed to be waterproof, but I needed something for different terrains. My in-laws have a nice I said burn area, like a fire pit on the bottom of their property. So I want to be able to walk down over those, like a grassy knoll. I want to be able to walk down over the knoll with ease and be able to do that sort of thing. So that's why, I wanted this foot, because the terrain issues. So we've got off track a little. What led you to the foundation of HuMoTech? I know that I read that, and by the way, you should Google yourself if you haven't done that. And you want to know, hey, where'd you read that? I don't know where you read that, but just Google yourself. There's like Mount Lebanon Magazine has an article on you, and there's some others. Some of them are a little older. But then I like to vet all my guests, so I just Google everyone. A couple of weeks ago, I was interviewing a fellow who was he was a veteran, and I was asking him, I said, so thank you for your service. You served in the Korea War. He's like, Vietnam. He's like, I'm not that old. And I was like, Google lied. So gotta kind of be careful sometimes. But what led you to founding HuMoTech? I know that when you were at Carnegie Mellon that you were doing some of this work. In fact, one of the things I read, your advisor said that you worked on their greatest project, he called it, with regards to prosthetics. What led to the genesis of this company? So,
let's see. Well, there was a lot there. Some really good points. You did your homework well. Oh, there's the fire truck. Right. So, as you said, the technology behind HuMoTech was formed at Carnegie Mellon. Well, so for as long as I can remember, I was interested in starting a company. I had this just sort of childish curiosity about it. It wasn't until when I started in the PhD program, it wasn't immediately obvious that my work was going to turn into a company. In fact, as my research progressed, I started to get the sense that building a robotic prosthetic foot maybe wasn't such a great business opportunity. But my research evolved, And at some point, after having numerous conversations with patients and clinicians, learning more about the reimbursement difficulties in particular, I think, started to get very interested in this idea of how do we reshape the process of both developing new products as well as prescribing existing products, and I was thinking more about the process than I was any particular technology. But what we realized was that the emulator systems we were using in the lab to try to discover new applications for robotics in prosthetics, we realized we could use the same technology and apply it to these practical clinical problems.
Sure.
The emulator could not just exhibit the behaviors of, futuristic devices, but we could also program it to mimic devices like the one you're wearing right now. And this was a pretty, it's a pretty simple translation technologically, but it took me a long time to make that mental shift from thinking about the very long term to thinking about the short term. And at the same time, I was going around to conferences presenting my research and realized that there was interest from other labs, academic, government labs, in using our emulator systems in their own research projects, potentially for unrelated projects, and so I got to this point where I realized, okay, there's this short-term opportunity. We can build these emulator systems and sell them to labs, and it was pretty clear to me how I would do that.
Right.
And at the same time, we had this exciting long-term vision of applying this technology in the clinical world. And that path was much less clear to me. But I thought, okay, let's take the leap and see what we can do with this. I guess that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It does, absolutely. Several months ago, Drew Buffett, who's the director of prosthetics for Delatour Orthotics and Prosthetics here in Pittsburgh, sent me a picture of this space-age looking boot. And at the time, I was an experienced amputee, but I was very green to O and P. So I'm, he's trying to expose me to everything. And all the email said was HuMoTech, and that's it. And I'm like, and he's sending me this to use on social media. I'm like, I don't know what to say about this. And so I Googled HuMoTech. But before I get into that part of the story, how did you link up with Drew and with Delatour?
Good question. I honestly don't remember the moment that I met Drew. Things all happened very quickly, but I think in general it all started, as I said earlier, with Dr. Marianne McNevich. Yeah. Me or my advisor or one of my colleagues would be sitting around the table at an amputee clinic, just waiting to meet patients and chit-chatting, and it's likely that at one of those meetings somebody bumped into Drew and got talking. Sure. That was really how I started meeting folks in the local community. Okay. After that, for some reason, we developed somewhat of a special relationship with Delatour. It wasn't like a conscious thing. Right. Just met Drew, and then met Kate, and then I met Libby, and I realized Libby's son went to high school with me. Oh, wow. Just, started meeting the whole family. I met Ed, and it was just it's a great group of people. Delatour kept helping us out. Kate took a particular interest in what we're doing, I think, and came in and helped out with some of our experiments. We did some work with Kate where actually she was at the controls of the emulator.
Okay.
Using the system and interacting with the patient and fine-tuning the settings
Nice.
to find what works best for the patient.
Sure. So I get this picture from Drew, and I had no idea what HuMoTech was. I think I did email him back and say, "Is this Pittsburgh based?" And that was it's. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth with a prosthetist to get the information I need, and so a Google search led me to the HuMoTech website, and I watched the video of the emulator, and I thought, this is just like space age, next level stuff. And I thought, well, I'm going to share this because, again, I understand social media because my own life, I use social media. At the time, I didn't understand social media for O&P. I do a little bit better now. So I said, I'm going to share this video because I think it's cool and I think people in the amputee community will love this. And so I shared it, and the actual response, the way I say this, I always click for our iTunes upload that this is clean. But the response was, someone said to me, "What the hell is that?" And I said, "I don't know," but I said, "It's going to change the way we look at prosthetics." I said, that I do know. So with that in mind, in layman's terms, how does the prosthesis emulator work? What information do you look to gain from it? What do you look to accomplish with it?
So the emulator can do a lot of different things. The simplest way to put this is that the emulator is a robotic, prosthetic, or orthotic device that is reprogrammable. It can take on the characteristics of any device out there on the market or any device you can dream up in the lab.
Okay.
And it provides the opportunity for patients to test drive these different devices and get real-time feedback on how the device affects their gait.
Sure.
It's different than conventional, quote-unquote, conventional robotic devices in that it has all the robotics technology, the motors, the batteries, the electronics, and everything off-board. And, that means that the patient is walking on a treadmill or some other kind of moving walkway. And by placing all the components off-board, the device that the patient wears is very lightweight. Because what we want is for this robot to be able to feel like other products that may not be robotic. Sure. And a big difference between the foot you're wearing and a robotic foot is the robotic foot's a lot heavier.
Right. Yeah.
So we take all that weight off, and then we can emulate devices like you're wearing. One of the things we can do is, for instance, say you're walking at a steady speed, we can tune a knob, we can turn a knob and change the stiffness of the foot. So while you're walking, we can make it stiffer, and we can say, how does that feel? We can make it softer. How does that feel?
Okay.
And through engaging with you, we can figure out what stiffness setting is best, rather than just looking up the stiffness setting in a table based on your body weight.
Okay.
And we've found that patients find this experience to be very useful.
That is next level awesome, because as an amputee, so I look at this different than someone who's not an amputee. So as an amputee, it can be daunting to say, what kind of leg do I want? What kind of components do I want? What kind of foot do I want? And there are companies, yes, then they can say, hey, you can try our foot for 30 days, 60 days, whatever. Other companies are like, I don't think so. Which I'm like, well, there's over 200 feet on the market, and it just becomes this. It's overwhelming, when you start thinking about it. When I was in Ohio before, my prosthetist just picked the foot and said, here, kind of like when I was a kid and my mother would pick my food and say, here, eat this. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing, just kind of being spoon-fed. So when I come back here and I start working with Drew, I'm like, oh, you want my opinion? It's like, that was really different for me. And so I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. But when you talk about, you're able to take the emulator and make these adjustments and say, how does that feel? when you trial a foot, and I trialed, another company came out with a similar foot to the one I'm wearing, and I trialed it because I wanted to write a review on it, and I had really no intention of keeping it, but, I figured, hey, I work with Delatour now, I can do this a little easier than a lot of patients. And I trialed the foot, and I said, it feels like I'm walking, if I had my foot, my natural foot, and you cut it off in the middle, it feels like I'm walking on half a foot. So, we played with the settings and the screws, but you couldn't do anything about it. And so I like what you're saying with the emulator. You could adjust more to maybe find out, well, maybe that's not the right foot, but this foot is. And so I think that takes it to, again, I don't want to say I believe that takes it to the next level, because none of us have the time to try 200 feet, and companies get charged restocking fees, and they don't want to, Delatour doesn't want to pay the restocking fee for all these feet. Fortunately, the ones I've tested, the company will be like, hey, we have a great relationship, we'll waive the restocking fee, which makes it nice to be able to try that. So I like what I'm hearing with what the emulator can do. Do you think it's practical or realistic that an amputee, so I have ABC foot, would it be practical for an amputee who already has a foot to get on the emulator and discover that I have ABC foot, but maybe XYZ foot would work better for me for what I need and what, in my gait? Is that something a practical application that could happen?
Yeah, great question. Would you mind if I said a couple things before answering that question?
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because every time you talk, you have so many great points, and I want to respond to some of them.
Sure.
So first of all, I want to say that as I hear you talking, it's obvious how you are a very exceptional patient.
Thank you. I don't want to be. Oh, I know. No, thank you.
I mean, it's obvious. Most patients don't have the time or the patience or the knowledge or whatever it is to go out and do their own research. It's not easy. It's not like there's a Consumer Reports for prosthetic feet. And as you said, there's hundreds of products out there. So you've got to slog through all this disorganized information and try to make sense of it. And I think that's hard and maybe impossible to really make an optimal choice.
Right.
And even if you do find a product that you like, who's to say your prosthetist is going to agree with you, or that your insurance company is going to pay for it?
Exactly.
So I think for the patient to be as engaged as you are is a great thing, and that's part of what we want to do. We want to make it easier for the patient to be engaged, and I think our process helps with that. Okay, so your question was, a patient comes in and they have foot ABC. Is it possible they get on the emulator and discover that they prefer foot XYZ?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't want to pretend that our technology is ready for prime time. We're still in the early stages.
Sure.
But this has absolutely happened with us in our experiments. Oftentimes we program the emulator with a mode that's similar to the device that the patient walked in with.
Okay.
And through the course of the trial, we'll have them compare that mode against different modes, and you will realize that sometimes that mode's best, but sometimes it's not. And we don't tell the patient, oh, you should, go get your foot returned, because we're just not there yet.
Right,
But that's certainly a possibility. Something just clicked in my head. As you were saying, really the core of what we're doing is enabling the efficient trialing of prosthetic feet. Like you said, some manufacturers will, give out loaner feet.
Right.
And there might be a small restocking fee, but really the problem is that it just takes too long to trial different feet.
Absolutely.
I mean, you were telling a story of you comparing one foot against another, and think about how long that took. And you're just looking at 2 feet. There are so many more options out there. So instead, with the emulator, while you're walking, we can swap out the foot. You don't need to tighten any screws. You just change the software. And you can enable these very direct comparisons. You can take 5 steps with product ABC, and then 5 steps with XYZ, and then go back to ABC if you want, and really make very direct comparisons to see which one you prefer. And another interesting thing is that these comparisons can be totally blinded. And that's to say that, no one needs to know what brand of foot is currently being tested.
Okay.
You can anonymize it. So you're trying foot A, B, and C, and that might be, Osher, Ottobock, and, whatever.
Right.
But nobody needs to know that, because that's just distracting.
Right.
We would prefer to focus on the functionality of the device and its effect on you, not the brand or the color or the material it's made out of.
Right. And I like how you say that, because as you're describing this, I'm sitting here thinking about recently the foot I have had to be identically replaced. There was a malfunction or something, and I just they're like, oh yeah, and I know people at the company, so I just kind of reached out to the company directly, and he's like, yeah, email Drew the fix, and he'll tell you what that is. And so I went in to see Drew, and I'm like, so how are we going to fix this? He's like, we're going to replace the foot. He said, they're just going to send us another one. And I'm like, oh, that's not any fun. I mean, because I was, I liked the technology of O&P. And so when the new foot came in, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, he'll just stick it on, and it'll feel like the other one, but it needed adjusted. So here we go. Turn the screw. Then you walk, whatever it is, 10 feet. Nope, turn. And so it's like 15, 20 minutes of your day, which in the course of 24 hours may not be a long time, but it's time that maybe you're not being as efficient as you otherwise could be. And so what I'm hearing from you is the emulator could eliminate a lot of the need for that constant stand up, sit down, walk, stand up, sit down, walk kind of thing that we have to go through.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think when you get a new foot, that's one of the most challenging or daunting things as a patient, is to have to go through that adjustment phase. And then you're like, yeah, okay, this feels good, and you're walking on, this hard floor. But then you get out in the real world and you walk on your gravel driveway, or you walk through the yard, or whatever, whatever you're doing in your daily life, and you're like, oh, this needs adjusted. So then you're back. Mm-hmm. So I like that. I like what you're saying about how the emulator, you're not having to adjust the foot constantly. You're just changing what the emulator is doing.
Let me throw something else in there, which is that there are these psychological aspects to this selection process that I think are interesting. When you're there trying out a new foot and getting adjustments, there's no real motivation for you to pursue other options. I mean, you're kind of stuck, and you're more likely to blame yourself than you are to blame the device.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're not thinking, oh, maybe there's another device out there that'd be like 10 times better.
Right.
You may not even be aware of the situation that you're in. I think, again, you're an exceptional patient. You know that there's hundreds of products out there of all various shapes and flavors. But I've seen it before, where you get the sense that the device and the patient are not a great fit, and that's holding them back.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend who's also an amputee that I met since I came on with Delatour, and he had the same brand foot that I have, but he's an AK. And he told me, he said, I started out as a BK. He said, when you become an AK, he said, that foot just functions differently. He said, it's hard to describe without, and I said, I don't want to become an AK to find out. But he said, but I recognize it, because one of the things that I love about what I get to do with Delatour, it's not just social media or doing a podcast, but I get to talk to a lot of patients, and not just our patients, other patients that are with other companies. And to hear them talk about, how the feet work for them, and what they think they need or what they believe they need. And so one of the things that happens that you said earlier that I wanted to touch on is that on the emulator you can make it blind, so they don't know that this represents the Oser foot or the Autobach foot or whichever, Freedom Innovations or whoever it might be. And I think that's important because some people want that brand or that name. And for me, it would be important. Well, I love the company that I'm with. I promote them on my own personal social media, and I think they're an awesome company. And I would not, you could say, oh, this would be better. Nope, I don't want to hear that. But if you stuck me on the emulator and didn't tell me, I might say, wow, this is amazing. I can't do this, and I'd be hoping that it was still the same product. So I like that you can, because, a lot of people say, hey, I want this foot. My insurance says, no, that's not medically necessary. And so you go down that road again.
Absolutely.
So I want to look at this from the perspective of how can the emulator and the data that you obtain, how can it help doctors? How can it help the physiatrists who are writing the prescriptions and seeing the patients know what's best? Because, I think you said earlier about, as a clinician, you have to rely on past experience. But how can the doctors learn to use this data to help them give the patient a more ideal foot?
That's a really good question. So one of the challenges with a question like this is that I kind of get the sense that there are sort of two types of physicians that are making these prescriptions. You have people like Dr. Munin and Dr. McNevich that are real experts.
Right.
And then you've got everybody else,
right?
Who,
yes.
They see an amputee, they got to give them a prescription for a leg, but they don't know a thing about prosthetics. So I guess let's start with that camp. If you don't know anything about prosthetics, this is an obvious win. Because, whether you know a lot about prosthetics or you don't, I believe that this process will be useful because at the end of the day, we're just exploring options and gathering data about how the patient performs with different products. So regardless of how much you know, this will inform your decision making. Am I getting at the root of your question? I guess
you are, because one of the things, and you're right. There are multiple camps really when it comes to doctors who write these prescriptions, and I try to push this. I call it the team approach. So there, and I look at myself as the captain of the team. So there's me, there's the prosthetist, there's the physiatrist, and a lot of times there's a physical therapist that's involved. And so everyone kind of this collaborative effort to make it the best possible outcome an amputee can have, and I push that. And so I personally, my research, what I know, I don't want my PCP writing the prescription for my prosthesis, because while they may be more than willing, and while they may have had a 10-minute or an hour-long class in medical school about it, when I look at someone, and Dr. Munin is the only physiatrist I've ever seen. Well, that's not entirely. I did when I was in the hospital. I saw one of his partners, but that notwithstanding, that group is the only group that I've seen, and so I have to rely on their expertise, because he's not just a physiatrist. I know other physiatrists who don't know the first thing about amputees because that's not their chosen area. Where Dr. Munin he's that expert in amputees, and so that's where I want to see these guys who are the experts. How are they going to look at this data to say, because my hope is that, and I'm very up with it as a patient. Doctors know I'm the most intelligent patient they're going to see in a day, and I don't say that to brag or to be arrogant or anything. I just do my research, and I know my body. And I wish a lot more patients took the time to do that. You go to the doctor and they'll give you a prescription for a medication. Here, take this. And the average patient's like, okay, doc, thanks. Me, why am I going to take this medicine? What's the risk versus the reward? What are the possible side effects? And it's like an hour-long thing, not because I want to get my money's worth from my 45 minutes to the doctor, but because I want to make the best informed decision. That's why I see a physiatrist to help me make that best informed decision. And so how could, these physiatrists that specialize in amputees use this data to maybe... it's hard to get a doctor to look at things differently, especially when they've done it for so long, but to maybe look at things differently and say, my experience has said this, but this data, a lot of doctors like their data. They like that, they like the research componentry.
Yeah, so, again, really great points. I think, any good physician is going to like the idea of having access to more information to inform their decision making process. I can't speak for Dr. Munin, but Dr. McNevich was pivotal in realizing the potential of this solution that we're talking about, because she recognizes that she herself is having to rely on her intuition more than on data, more than on published scientific evidence. So this is, I like what you were saying earlier about the team approach. It's really about empowering the whole team. We're measuring these outcomes and providing that data for everybody to use.
Right.
The patient has their voice, the physician has their voice, the insurance company has their voice. The idea is that by measuring this objective data and making unbiased recommendations, we can get everybody talking the same language, get everybody on the same page. And so when, so replace this kind of payer-provider distrust or tension with a mutual understanding about what's going to be best for the patient and how much it's going to cost.
Yeah. And to that point, I don't, from my perspective, Brian's perspective, I don't need a $60,000 foot and ankle combination. Number one, I'm going to jump in the pool and it's done because it's not waterproof. So the insurance company's like, what? So the foot I have cost just a little under $3,000, and I think it's fine. It's for what I want to do. I love it. But but one of the things that when you look at from the physiatrist point of view is one of the, at least with my experience, is with Dr. Munin saying I have to prove medical necessity, and he says, what did he say the other day? He said I'm not going to impeach myself with the insurance company because I say yes, you need this foot when the foot you have is working just fine. Mm-hmm. And there are PCPs though who don't know about prosthetics, and the patient says, I will write a prescription for this foot. Okay, you need a foot. Sure, I'll do that for you. And then the insurance companies come back and say, no, we don't think so. Not even close to that much money. And I am in this very, I often say I'm an anomaly. I am so lucky, blessed, fortunate, whatever word you want to throw in there, because I'm covered by 3 different insurances, and that's very rare for anyone, but especially for amputees. And on top of that, I've never had anything denied, ever, prosthetically. Never had anything denied because I see a physiatrist who's an expert in dealing with prosthetics and amputees and knows, hey, this is what's medically necessary, this is what they're going to approve, and keeps me within that bubble. Would I like something that looked like the Terminator? Maybe, like out for a night to look cool, But like last year we were in Vegas, and there, if you've ever walked the strip in Vegas, you see some interesting characters. So something like that might have been cool, but I'm probably a little more practical than that. So so as I do all of this, because I'm not a clinician, I'm not an engineer, not even close. I built Legos as a kid and erector sets, and so that's my level of engineering. I still play with Legos because
that's where it started for me.
I love Legos, and so but my I'm geared toward math. It just was never my thing. But I like to look at it from the perspective of what can be done to help patients the most, and I'm for wherever we're at in that spectrum. I'm for, because I can sit there and tell patients all day long, this is what you should do. Who are you? You're not, you're just some guy, right? It's not, you're just an amputee. What do you know? Okay, I get that. All right, so we basically touched on this, but I just kind of want to cover this a little bit. One of the things that I've learned is that as an amputee, is that before writing the prescription for the foot, as I said, I just went through this, the physiatrist wants evidence-based information. Why do you need this foot? What is this foot going to do for you? Kind of thing. Insurance companies, as we've said, want the same thing. My experience says the insurance company is going to give a new amputee a K1 or a K2 foot, and then they want that evidence. If you want anything else, give us the evidence to show us why we need to pay for that foot. Do you envision a time where prosthetics would refer amputees to come to HuMoTech to get this analysis done, to provide this evidence to the doctors, to the insurance companies, to the prosthetists, to help make these decisions better. I know that, earlier you said, you're not ready for prime time, but is that something, have you thought about that possibility, that how that might work out someday?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're particularly interested in this K2, K3 transition because it seems like patients can get stuck in K2
Yes.
and have trouble convincing the insurance company that, they have the potential to be K3. So, the emulator is perfectly suited for this problem because we can have the patient come in and run an evaluation where we compare a set of feet that includes some K2 products and some K3 products, and we can see if there's any potential for improved mobility if they were to be prescribed a K3 foot. And if the outcomes report that there is that potential, that's great because perhaps that could enable that patient to achieve higher level of mobility, a better quality of life, etc. But maybe the evidence isn't there, and maybe they stick with K2 products for now, and maybe they try again the next time they're eligible for a new foot. So yeah, I'm keenly interested in this transition, and I'm curious what your personal experience is with this, because I imagine you are like most, where you started out with sort of a lower functioning device and upgraded over time.
My first foot, which I still have, and I had said to Drew, I said, I want to bring this foot in. I said, I just want you to identify this. I have no idea what company it is or anything, but I still have it. And so I said, I want you to identify this foot. But it was, compared to what I'm using now, so thinking back, it was awful because it was just so stiff and it didn't allow. But when I look back, where was I at the time? So I was doing, and this is kind of where you talk about the K level and K1. So I was using it for transfers. I was, if you haven't, you need to listen to amplifepodcast.com. Because you're going to be episode 10 next week. But episode 7, I tell my story. And in my story, I mentioned, or if you followed me on social media, I was, January 1st, 2016, I weighed 505 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I'm 280 right now. And so I've lost a little bit of weight. But through doing that has improved my K level dramatically. And there was a period of time to start the weight loss. I ended up in the hospital, severe heart failure, and I was in UPMC for 47 days.
Oh, man.
But I got to go through inpatient rehab while I was there with people trained to deal with amputees. That's what took me from a K2 to a K3, mid K3. Was going through that rehab, and so when I look at, okay, I had those feet, didn't allow me to do a whole lot, but I wasn't doing it, and these patients are like, someone said to me the other day, they said, I need this, I forget what it's called because I'm a BK, but it's a particular knee, and it's like the latest, greatest knee that's on the market. And they said, I need this knee. And I'm like, well, what are you doing that would suggest to the insurance company that they should pay for this knee? I was like, well, I sit in my wheelchair and watch TV. I'm like, you are going to have a mechanical knee as long as you're doing that. I said, you're going to have to prove to them why they should give you a microprocessor, and not just because I want it, kind of thing. And I know that I make patients angry with that kind, but I feel I have a responsibility to be real and to be honest with them about that. And so for me, as I've progressed and I had those lower K level feet to where I have now, it's just been, one, it's night and day difference, but it's been such a long journey because I never knew. I have these feet, I never know where do we go next. I ended up, the insurance that I had at the time before would not pay for this is probably not the proper terminology, and when one of the prosthetists listens to this, they'll ding me on this, but I had before they wouldn't pay for what I refer to as an electronic vacuum, which is what I have now. So it's battery operated, I charge it, plug it in every night just like my cell phone, and I charge it. But there's evidence to suggest that the type of vacuum that I have is better for circulation for people. I'm also diabetic, so circulation we know could become an issue. And so there's this evidence to show that, but no, that's not medically necessary. So I ended up with a manual vacuum which was horrible. And the company, whatever, they're trying, and they've improved upon what that was, 3 years ago or whatever. But I wish there had been something like HuMoTech then, that I could have stepped on this machine and said, hey, this is what you need compared to what you're getting. Because a lot of amputees, and I was there, you talked about there's that tendency to blame yourself. Yeah, absolutely. I had a prosthesis, before I got linked up with Delatour, that it hurt. I mean, it hurt to wear it. I put it on. I'd be driving somewhere with my wife. I'd have to pull over and take it off because it just hurt to wear it. And I thought, what am I doing wrong? And I constantly blaming myself. And then I realized it's, Drew's like, it's not you. You have an ill-fitting prosthesis. I'm like, oh. And so I think that patient education has to come into all of this. So now I can go back and tell this person who first said to me when I showed them the HuMoTech video, they say, what is that? And I can say, well, this is how it's going to change things, over time. Because I think a lot of people without an explanation thought, how am I going to walk with that thing on my foot every day? And I'm like, well, I don't think that's the point. But I, to kind of, express, within that K level, a lot of people want these feet that are beyond, where they test at or where they're even ever going to get to. And so I think when you can measure that on a device or, on an emulator and say, hey, because you're going to break some hearts eventually. People are going to say, I want this foot, but I got to be a K3. And you're going to say the data says you're a K2 foot. You can, what you're doing, this is what you need. And people are going to be disappointed, and they're going to get angry, and they'll probably say mean things about you on social media.
But hey, at least I hope that they find the process empowering.
Right.
Because now look, I was evaluated, and here's what the data said.
Right.
And maybe I didn't get it this time, but I'm going to, spend the next couple of years trying to be more active, get more in shape, and be able to prove, that I can take it to the next level.
Absolutely. When we look at what when I ask you about what the emulator can do, and we look at what we're saying, can you take the emulator, can it go to that next level? So let's say someone comes in, they would have to be far more advanced than I, but let's say they come in, and sometimes insurance companies will cover a running blade, not very often, but once in a while they will. Could you make the emulator look at what that running blade could do, and if it would be wise, I don't know what other word to use, for the insurance company to pay for that for a patient?
It's a really good question. We haven't done any running to date, but in theory, absolutely. We just would have to develop the product in that direction. This issue of multiple feet for multiple applications is really interesting because most patients on private insurance or Medicare are never going to have the opportunity to get multiple products.
Right.
It's great that you are able to find a product that kind of does everything for you, but that's not always the case.
No.
So in theory, with the emulator, we could have the patient walk, and we could try a few different products, and then we could speed up the treadmill and have them at a running pace and compare the same set of products. And I think likely what the data will show is that different products are better suited to different activities.
Right.
We've seen that already. We've done some simple tests where we'll have the patient walk on level ground, and then we'll have them walk uphill. We'll incline the treadmill. And we find that very often a different product will make sense. Absolutely. Just walking uphill.
Right.
Obviously you're not going to have a different product every time you encounter a hill, swap out your foot. But you could do this for walking versus running. I think to really overcome this, you really got to change the way the insurance companies think.
Absolutely, you do. You do, because one of the things that you say that you talk about having the patient walk uphill, which for me personally, just as an amputee, I've never had. I mean, other than like the cardiovascular condition I need to improve upon, I've never had an issue walking uphill. But what I have found over the years walking an incline downhill is that the tibia will move forward in the socket, and there's a lot of times there's nothing that can be done other than you just need to be careful. But what I found with the foot that I have now is that's eliminated. We had a company meeting the other day, and it was at some hotel in RIDC Park, and when I was walking back to my Jeep, I had to walk downhill, and I'm just as natural as can be. And I thought, this is amazing, because where I live, I don't have a lot of up and down hills to deal with. And I thought, this is amazing. I don't feel that tibia moving forward at all with this foot. And even with this company's last foot, I had that issue. And I thought, this is really, and that kind of solidified for me that I made the right choice with doing, because when I want something, I kind of, I'm like a dog with a bone, I guess. I will try every avenue. If I think it's going to benefit me as an amputee, I'm going to try every avenue to get in there. And so, it just solidified for me walking downhill. I'm like, this is just so smooth.
That's great. Yeah, I think the point here is that certain products are, suited to perhaps a wider variety of different activities.
Right.
Like you were saying earlier, if your primary activities are transfer, from a wheelchair to a bed or whatever, then, a fairly inexpensive, satch foot is going to be just fine for that activity. It's not until you have the opportunity to explore other activities that you realize the limits of your technology.
And I think that another thing that, what the emulator can do, from my perspective, how it is, I've never worked for an insurance company, but I can kind of look at it from their point of view when I look at my case, because I didn't just put on a prosthesis and start walking and everything was great. It was a very long, full of complications and setbacks. So I can understand their point of, we don't want to pay all this money for a foot that may end up sitting in the corner of your house. Even though I don't always agree with insurance companies, I understand that point. Because, now I'm like, hey, people say, I wear my leg 2 hours a day, and I like roll my eyes. I'm like, it's the first thing I put on in the morning, and I say, I actually go to bed with it on, then I take it off like in the middle of the night. I finally for 3 hours. So it's 21 hours a day to wear this prosthetic, because it's part of me, and I feel incomplete without it now. But, but a lot of patients, that's what they end up doing, is they want the insurance company to buy this foot, and then it's over in the corner collecting dust, or I see them making videos drinking beer out of it, or something, and it's like the video's funny, sure, but, you just wasted however much money on that. So, I like that, we have this emerging technology that can help people figure out what, maybe not give them what they want all the time, but help them figure out what they need more often. So I've never done this with any guests before, but this just hit me when I was writing show notes. I want to do a lightning round. I'm going to say a word or a phrase, and there's 5 of them total. And I want you to tell me the very first thing that comes to your mind, regardless of what that is. And these are all they're all Pittsburgh based, so this should be easy. All right, so lightning round. I'm going to ask you 5 words or phrases. I want you to tell me the very first thing that comes to your mind. You ready?
I guess so.
All right. The Duquesne Incline.
The first thing, great view.
Permane Brothers.
Never had one.
What?
I've never had a Permane.
Are you even a Yinzer?
So I'm a vegetarian.
Okay.
Do they even have an option for me?
I don't think so. I could let you slide on the vegetarian part because, Permane Brothers is probably not your best option. Okay. Roberto Clemente.
Bridge.
Ben Roethlisberger.
Football.
All right, I lied. There's going to be 6. Tom Brady.
I'm a terrible Yinzer.
You know who Tom Brady is, though, right?
Yeah, but I I love board games, but if somebody takes out like the Pittsburgh trivia, oh my God.
You know who Ben is, right? Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know more about his scandal than his football, though.
Nothing wrong with that. Last one. This one I know you're gonna have something to say. HuMoTech.
First thing that comes to mind. That's so funny. HuMoTech is all I think about. Exciting times.
Okay. In my lifetime, I'm 41. In my lifetime, Pittsburgh has transformed from Steel City, or I've heard people call it Steel Town, USA, which I never cared for, like the Steel City, into a tech hub. A lot of people credit this to companies like Google and Uber. But on the flip side of these billion-dollar companies, we see many young entrepreneurs, inventors, researchers, and tech evangelists who are helping to give Pittsburgh a legacy as a tech town. Now, earlier this year, you were honored on the Who's Next for Technology list as one of 18 people credited with transforming Pittsburgh. What's it like for you to receive a recognition like that as one of the people who's transforming the city of Pittsburgh by having an incredible impact for social good through improving the lives of others? I know that's a lot to unwrap.
Yeah, it's something I'm still wrapping my head around, honestly. Most of the time I have my nose to the grindstone and I'm working tirelessly on, this solution we've been talking about. Rarely do I get the opportunity to take a step back and think about what this means on such a grand scale. As I just said, it's exciting times here at HuMoTech, here in Pittsburgh. And we'll see where it goes. I'm so wrapped up in, creating this new future that sometimes I forget to, enjoy the present.
Sure.
So this was one of those moments that kind of made me pause and appreciate, the opportunity that I've had and, how far we've made it so far.
Very good. So I've been talking today with Josh Caputo, the founder, president, CEO of HuMoTech in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. For more information about HuMoTech, visit their website, www.humotech, that's HuMotech.com, or connect with them on Facebook and Twitter at HuMoTech, and on Instagram at Humo_tech. Josh, thanks for taking part of your day to join me on Amp Life. It's been fun.
Thanks so much, Brian.
You've been listening to Amp Life, the #1 podcast for amputees, hosted by an amputee, and brought to you by Delatour Orthotics and Prosthetics, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a review on iTunes or give us a like on Facebook. I'm the Brian Moe. I invite you to visit our website, www.amplifepodcast.com, or check us out on Facebook at Amp Life Podcast.